You are tired, not because life is demanding, but because you are constantly monitoring yourself through the imagined eyes of others. You replay conversations that already ended. You soften opinions before they are even expressed. You hesitate, not because you lack intelligence or courage, but because somewhere along the way you learned that being accepted felt safer than being truthful. This vigilance masquerades as self-awareness, as emotional intelligence, as maturity. Yet beneath it lives a quiet exhaustion that never fully goes away. When your inner state depends on how you are perceived, rest becomes impossible. Every social interaction turns into a subtle performance. Every silence becomes suspicious. Every delay in response feels like a verdict. You are not present in your own life because part of your attention is always scanning for approval, for reassurance, for confirmation that you are still allowed to belong. The mind was never designed to live this way. It cannot remain steady while constantly negotiating its right to exist. This is not a personal failure. It is a psychological trap that rewards compliance and punishes independence early and often. Over time, the habit becomes invisible. You stop noticing how often you abandon your own judgment to avoid friction. You tell yourself you are being flexible, understanding, adaptable. But adaptation that costs self-command is not wisdom. It is erosion. What makes this condition so dangerous is not the discomfort itself, but how normal it feels. You begin to believe that anxiety is just part of being responsible, that self-doubt is the price of being considerate. Yet the Stoics warned of this long ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 2, Paragraph 1, that the tranquility of the soul depends on keeping the ruling faculty free from disturbance. A mind ruled by external opinion cannot be free. It is always bracing for impact. If this description unsettles you, it should. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something true is being named. You are not weak. You are overextended. You are trying to control what was never within your authority. And until that error is corrected, no amount of reassurance will calm you. Do not look away yet. The discomfort you feel now is the signal that the ground is about to shift. What follows will not flatter you, but it will steady you. The invisible cost of seeking approval. Seeking approval feels harmless because it presents itself as protection. It promises smoother relationships, fewer conflicts, and a sense of safety within the group. At first, it even appears virtuous. You listen carefully, you adjust, you consider others. But slowly, without announcement, the center of gravity moves. Decisions are no longer guided by reason or principle, but by anticipation. How will this be received? What reaction will this trigger? What might I lose? This is where the real cost begins. Every choice now carries emotional risk. You hesitate before acting, not because the action is wrong, but because the outcome is uncertain. You start delaying decisions until consensus appears, even when consensus is impossible. Over time, you lose trust in your own judgment. You begin to believe clarity must come from outside you, from approval, praise, or at least the absence of criticism. Anxiety about the future grows from this soil. Not because tomorrow is inherently threatening, but because tomorrow contains people, opinions, and variables you cannot command. You are not afraid of events. You are afraid of exposure, afraid that without validation, your actions will feel unjustified, your efforts meaningless. When approval becomes the measure of safety, you stop acting in accordance with virtue and start acting to avoid discomfort. Seneca addressed this directly in Letters from a Stoic, Letter 7, when he warned that those who live by the judgment of others surrender their freedom before it is even taken. The danger is not rejection itself, but dependence. Once your emotional stability is tied to external response, you are no longer governing yourself. You are being governed. This is why approval seeking never delivers peace. It creates a constant background tension, a low-grade fear that never fully resolves. Even praise does not calm it for long. Praise raises the standard. Silence becomes threatening again. The cycle continues because the mind senses the imbalance. You are investing emotional energy where you have no authority, and the mind resists being placed in a position it cannot secure. This does not mean you should reject others or become indifferent to relationships. That would be another form of imbalance. The Stoic insight is sharper than that. It reveals that approval is not nourishment, it is feedback, useful when observed calmly, destructive when used as fuel. The moment you confuse the two, you place your inner life at the mercy of chance. Recognizing this is not yet freedom, but it is the end of self-deception. Once you see the cost clearly, you are ready to confront the deeper error that sustains it, the confusion between influence and control. And this is where the real transformation begins. The moment Stoicism refuses to comfort you. This is the moment where most people quietly turn away, not because the ideas are complex, but because they stop offering comfort. Stoicism does not arrive to soothe your emotions or reassure you that everything will be fine. It does something far more demanding. It asks you to stop lying to yourself about what is actually causing your distress. You may have hoped for techniques to calm anxiety, phrases to silence fear, or habits that make discomfort disappear. Stoicism offers none of that. Instead, it confronts you with a simple but unsettling truth. Your suffering is not created by events, nor by people, nor by the future you cannot predict. It is created by the judgments you attach to them. And those judgments are yours. This is where emotional resistance appears. The mind wants relief without responsibility. It wants peace without discipline. But the Stoics were unapologetic about this point. Epictetus wrote in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 1, that people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. This statement is not comforting. It removes excuses. It places the weight of inner life back where it belongs. Stoicism refuses to validate emotional chaos simply because it feels intense. It does not say your fear is justified because it is painful. It asks whether your fear is reasonable, whether it is aligned with reality, whether it comes from a correct understanding of what is within your power. This can feel cold at first, even harsh. But it is honest, and honesty is the beginning of stability. When you stop seeking approval, you often expect relief to follow immediately. Instead, you encounter emptiness, a silence where validation used to live. Stoicism does not rush to fill that space. It teaches you to stand in it, to examine what remains when external reassurance is removed. What remains is your capacity for reason, your ability to judge events without surrendering to them, your responsibility to govern your own reactions. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 6, Paragraph 8, that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Power here does not mean force. It means authority, the authority to question your first reaction instead of obeying it. This is why Stoicism feels uncomfortable before it feels liberating. It removes emotional crutches. It exposes the habits that kept you dependent on approval, reassurance, and control over outcomes. But it does so to return something far more valuable: self-command, the ability to remain steady without needing permission from circumstances. If this feels demanding, it should. Strength is not built by comfort, it is built by clarity. And clarity requires you to see where you have been giving away authority that was always yours. What comes next will explain how this error operates in the mind and why confusing influence with control keeps emotional suffering alive long after events have passed. The psychological trap: confusing influence with control. The mind rarely collapses all at once. It drifts, and one of its most dangerous drifts is subtle enough to feel reasonable. You begin to confuse influence with control. You know intellectually that you cannot command other people, outcomes, or the future. Yet emotionally, you behave as if you should be able to. You hope that if you choose the right words, delay the right amount of time, explain yourself clearly enough, or anticipate reactions accurately enough, you can secure a predictable response. This hope feels responsible. In reality, it is the engine of emotional exhaustion. Influence is the space where effort lives. Control is the space where outcomes are decided. When the mind blurs the line between the two, it creates a permanent state of tension. You start measuring your inner peace by results that were never promised. A conversation goes poorly and you replay it, searching for the sentence that should have changed everything. A decision is misunderstood, and you interpret that misunderstanding as failure. A future event is uncertain, and your body reacts as if danger is already present. This is not because you desire power over others. It is because the mind hates uncertainty, and approval-seeking trains the mind to believe that certainty can be negotiated if you perform well enough. The result is a constant state of readiness, as if life were an exam that never ends. You are not resting between moments, you are bracing. Epictetus addressed this illusion directly in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 2, Chapter 5, when he warned that attempting to control what is not ours makes us anxious, frustrated, and resentful, while neglecting what is ours leaves us weak. The tragedy is that most people invert this. They obsess over outcomes and neglect judgment. They monitor reactions and abandon reason. They chase certainty and lose stability. When influence is mistaken for control, emotions spiral because they are responding to an impossible demand. You expect your actions to guarantee results. When they do not, you interpret this as personal inadequacy. Anxiety intensifies because the mind believes it has failed at a task that could never be completed. This is why reassurance never lasts. It does not correct the underlying error. Notice how this plays out in everyday life. You send a message and wait. Silence feels heavier than it should. Not because silence is harmful, but because you believe your worth is being evaluated in that space. You prepare for a meeting and imagine every possible reaction. Not because preparation is wrong, but because you believe the reaction will determine your value. The problem is not engagement with life. The problem is the belief that engagement grants authority over outcomes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, Paragraph 47, that it is enough to do what is right, speak what is true, and accept what follows. Anything beyond that is a demand placed on reality. And reality does not negotiate. Once you see this clearly, something begins to loosen, not yet peace, but perspective. You start to recognize where your effort ends and where fate begins. You begin to see that emotional suffering is often the signal that you are trying to govern what was never entrusted to you. This recognition is not yet freedom, but it is the doorway to it. What follows is the Stoic principle that resolves this confusion at its root, not as an abstract idea but as lived relief, the moment where the mind stops arguing with reality and starts aligning with it. The dichotomy of control, not as theory, but as relief. The moment relief becomes possible is the moment the mind stops arguing with reality. This is where the dichotomy of control enters, not as a concept to admire, but as a line that reorganizes your inner life. The Stoics were precise about this because confusion here destroys emotional stability. Some things are up to you, some things are not. And every ounce of suffering comes from treating the second category as if it belonged to the first. What is up to you is smaller than you were taught to believe, yet more powerful than you realize. Your judgments, your intentions, your effort, your character, these are always available to you, regardless of circumstance. What is not up to you includes outcomes, opinions, recognition, timing, and the behavior of others. The mistake is not wanting good outcomes. The mistake is tying your inner state to their arrival. Epictetus defined this with uncompromising clarity in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 1, when he stated that some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are body, property, reputation, office, and whatever is not of our own doing. This is not philosophy meant for debate. It is instruction meant for survival. When this distinction becomes lived rather than memorized, something immediate happens. Emotional pressure decreases, not because life becomes predictable, but because the mind stops demanding guarantees. You still act, you still care, you still invest effort, but you no longer ask your effort to secure results. You ask it only to be honest, rational, and aligned with virtue. Consider how different this feels in practice. You speak truthfully without rehearsing how it will be received. You prepare thoroughly without imagining how others will judge your performance. You make decisions based on reason rather than approval. Outcomes still matter, but they no longer define you. They inform you. This is the difference between engagement and attachment. This is why the dichotomy of control produces relief without numbing you. It does not tell you to stop feeling. It tells you where feeling belongs. Emotion becomes a response, not a command. When disappointment arises, you examine the judgment behind it. When anxiety appears, you ask what you are trying to control that lies outside your authority. This pause alone restores balance. Marcus Aurelius practiced this relentlessly. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 11, paragraph 18, he reminded himself to confine disturbance and anxiety to matters within his control and to meet everything else with acceptance, not passivity. Acceptance rooted in reason. Acceptance that frees energy instead of draining it. The mind resists this at first because it feels like loss. Letting go of control feels like exposure. But what you are actually releasing is an impossible burden. The need to secure the future, the need to manage perception, the need to be validated. When these demands fall away, clarity takes their place, and clarity is stabilizing. This is not the end of the transformation, it is the foundation. Once the mind understands what it governs and what it must accept, it becomes capable of something most people never experience. Cooperation with fate without resignation, strength without tension, action without inner conflict, acceptance of fate without resignation. Acceptance of fate is often misunderstood because it is confused with surrender. It sounds passive, even defeatist, as if you are being asked to stop caring or to endure whatever happens without response. The Stoics meant nothing of the sort. For them, acceptance was not withdrawal from life, but alignment with it. It was the decision to stop exhausting yourself by resisting what has already occurred. You cannot undo what has happened. You cannot reverse outcomes, erase reactions, or edit the past into something more comfortable. Yet much of emotional suffering comes from trying to do exactly that. The mind replays events, argues with reality, and demands a different version of what is already fixed. This inner resistance is not strength, it is friction, and friction always generates pain. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea repeatedly. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, paragraph 23, he reminded himself to love whatever happens to him because it was woven into his fate. This was not romantic language. It was strategic clarity. If an event has occurred, it belongs to the order of the world. Fighting it internally does not change it. It only drains you. Acceptance begins at the moment you stop asking why this happened to you and start asking how you will respond to what has happened. This shift restores agency. Fate determines circumstances. You determine judgment. You determine conduct. You determine whether an event becomes instruction or injury. This is where strength lives. Notice how much energy is reclaimed when resistance ends. The mind no longer wastes effort demanding fairness from reality. It no longer measures itself against imagined alternatives. It deals with what is. This does not make life easier. It makes it workable. Emotional intensity decreases because the mind is no longer at war with time, chance, or other people. Seneca addressed this in Letters from a Stoic, letter 91, when he wrote that fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. The difference between the two is not what happens to them, but how much suffering they add through refusal. Acceptance is the decision to walk instead of being dragged. This does not mean you stop striving. On the contrary, once resistance dissolves, effort becomes cleaner. You act without bitterness. You correct mistakes without self-hatred. You pursue goals without tying your dignity to their outcome. Acceptance clears the emotional noise that distorts judgment. It restores focus. What surprises most people is how empowering this feels. Letting go of internal protest does not weaken you. It stabilizes you. You become harder to provoke, not because you are indifferent, but because you are no longer arguing with what cannot be changed. Your attention returns to what remains alive and possible. This prepares the ground for the final discipline, the tool that keeps emotions from reclaiming authority when life becomes uncertain again. Reason, not as cold logic but as an anchor, a daily practice that keeps the mind from drifting back into chaos. Reason as an anchor in emotional chaos. Emotions do not become destructive because they exist. They become destructive when they are allowed to rule. The Stoics never asked you to silence feeling or deny its presence. They asked you to put it in its proper place. Reason is not meant to erase emotion. It is meant to give it structure, boundaries, and proportion. Without reason, emotion expands to fill every space it is given. When anxiety rises, it feels urgent. It demands immediate attention. It insists that something must be done now. But urgency is not the same as importance. Reason steps in at this exact point, not to argue with the feeling, but to question the judgment that produced it. What am I assuming? What outcome am I fearing? Is this fear based on what is within my control? This pause interrupts the spiral before it gains momentum. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to do this relentlessly. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, paragraph 48, he reminded himself to strip away impressions and see things as they truly are. Not as the mind dramatizes them, but as they exist in fact. This practice does not suppress emotion. It prevents exaggeration, and exaggeration is what turns discomfort into chaos. Reason functions as an anchor because it slows the mind without freezing it. You still feel disappointment, fear, frustration, but these emotions no longer dictate behavior. They become signals rather than commands. You acknowledge them, examine the belief beneath them, and decide how to respond. This is the difference between reaction and action. Most people believe they lack emotional control because they feel intensely. The truth is simpler. They have never practiced separating sensation from judgment. Emotion arrives first, judgment follows immediately. Reason teaches you to create space between the two. In that space, choice returns. Epictetus emphasized this in Discourses of Epictetus, Book 2, Chapter 18, when he explained that when an impression arises, you must not be carried away by it, but examine it and say, you are an impression and not at all the thing you appear to be. This single habit changes everything. It turns the mind from a battlefield into a place of deliberation. With reason in place, emotional chaos loses its authority. Anxiety may visit, but it does not stay. Fear may speak, but it is no longer obeyed automatically. You begin to trust yourself again, not because life becomes predictable, but because your responses become reliable. This reliability is what replaces approval. You no longer need external reassurance to feel steady. Your confidence is no longer loud or performative. It is quiet, consistent, and grounded in self-command. You know that whatever arises, you can meet it without losing yourself, and when this happens, something unexpected follows. Strength no longer feels like effort. It feels like alignment, the absence of inner contradiction, the sense that you are no longer divided against yourself. This is the strength that remains when approval loses its power. The quiet strength that replaces approval. When approval loosens its grip, it does not leave behind emptiness. It leaves behind space. And in that space, a different kind of strength takes shape. Not the kind that announces itself, not confidence built on visibility or praise, but something quieter and more durable. You stop asking whether you are doing enough to be accepted and start asking whether you are acting in accordance with your judgment. This shift alone changes how you move through the world. Anxiety begins to fade, not because life becomes easier, but because urgency disappears. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself prematurely or justify every choice. Silence becomes neutral again. Disagreement no longer feels like rejection. You act, speak, and decide without constantly checking how it will land. This does not make you careless, it makes you coherent. Marcus Aurelius described this state in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 7, paragraph 67, when he reminded himself that the best revenge is to be unlike those who do injury. Strength here is not confrontation, it is consistency. You remain governed by reason even when others are not. You do not outsource your stability to their reactions. What falls away first is self-betrayal. You notice how often you once adjusted your values to maintain comfort. Without approval as currency, that trade no longer makes sense. You begin to tolerate short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term integrity, and this tolerance is liberating. You are no longer at war with your own judgment. This strength does not demand recognition. In fact, it often goes unnoticed, and that is precisely why it holds. It does not rise and fall with praise. It does not collapse under criticism. It is built on repetition, choosing reason again and again, accepting outcomes without resentment, acting without asking permission from uncertainty. Seneca pointed toward this independence in Letters from a Stoic, letter 31, when he wrote that the wise person is content with himself, not because he needs nothing, but because he is no longer dependent on what lies beyond his control. This contentment is not withdrawal from life, it is freedom within it. You may notice something subtle happening as you listen. The need to be seen diminishes. The impulse to prove yourself weakens. What replaces it is steadiness, a sense that you can move forward without negotiating your worth at every step. This is not emotional numbness, it is emotional independence. And with this independence comes a final realization. Strength is not built by dominating circumstances or people. It is built by refusing to be governed by what you cannot command. When approval is no longer required, your actions become simpler, your mind becomes quieter, your energy returns to where it belongs. What remains now is not instruction, but integration, a new agreement with reality itself, one that does not promise comfort, but offers peace of a more durable kind, a new agreement with reality. You do not leave this with answers about the world. You leave with a clearer relationship to it. The need to control reactions, outcomes, or opinions no longer presses against you in the same way. Not because those forces disappeared, but because you stopped granting them authority over your inner life. This is the agreement Stoicism asks you to make. Reality will unfold as it will. Your task is not to negotiate with it, but to meet it with reason. Nothing dramatic is required from you now. No declarations, no reinvention, only consistency. To notice when the mind reaches outward for reassurance and gently return it to what is yours to govern. Judgment, intention, conduct. Each moment offers the same quiet choice. React blindly or respond deliberately. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 12, paragraph 36, that you always own the power to have no opinion about a thing and to remove disturbance from your mind. This power is subtle. It does not shout. It does not rush. But it is always available. And when practiced, it changes the texture of daily life. You will still feel emotion. You will still care. You will still encounter uncertainty, but these no longer threaten your stability. They become part of the landscape rather than forces that dictate your direction. Approval may come or not. Outcomes may align or not. Fate will continue to move without consulting you. And yet you remain intact. This is not detachment from life. It is participation without self-betrayal. It is the ability to act without fear of judgment, to accept what follows without resentment, and to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. You are no longer enslaved by emotion, because emotion no longer rules. It informs, then yields to reason. If there is one thing to carry forward, it is this. Strength is not something you acquire. It is something you stop giving away. Each time you choose clarity over chaos, acceptance over resistance, and reason over impulse, you reinforce that strength. Nothing more is required. Nothing less will do.